Discover the origin story of the most infamous rap group of all time in our multi-part animated documentary. Haven't you ever wondered how the group was formed? How Ice Cube caught Dr. Dre's attention when he was only 14? When Dre started producing music? And how the members first crossed paths? You will also hear little-known tales, like how Eazy-E and Dr. Dre used to DJ together back in their high school days, the forgotten Hispanic member Krazy Dee, Ice Cube's first rap group Stereo Crew, the D.O.C's journey from Dallas to the West Coast, and the reasons behind Arabian Prince's departure. In this first series of episodes, we'll dive deep into the members' childhoods, the formation of the group, and the events leading up to the release of their debut album. The truth is rarely simple, especially when it's buried under nearly 4 decades of stories, conflicting dates, and memories that twist over time. But I did my best to piece it all together in the right time frame, introducing all the key players who shaped their success. Hope y'all enjoy it. Let's take it back to '79, a pivotal year that laid the foundation for one of the most infamous rap groups of all time, N.W.A. That year, a 10-year-old Ice Cube heard his first rap song in his uncle's car. A 14-year-old Dr. Dre was completely awestruck at a George Clinton concert, an experience that would forever shape his musical perspective. Eazy-E started skipping class, and Lonzo opened what would become a legendary spot in hip-hop history, Eve After Dark. That club played such a crucial role in N.W.A.'s formation that decades later, Dre paid tribute to it during his Super Bowl halftime show. For those watching who might not be familiar with hip-hop's early days, let's set the scene. In 1979, hip-hop had only been around for 6 years. Since its birth in the summer of '73, DJs were the main stars, while MCs, what we now call rappers, were mostly there to hype the crowd. It wasn't until the mid-'80s, as hip-hop transitioned into its golden era, that lyrics took center stage and rappers became the main attraction. Now, let's take a quick flashback to the early lives of N.W.A.'s founding members. And where better to start than with the name that instantly comes to mind when we think of a hip-hop producer, the legendary Dr. Dre. Born in 1965, Andre Young entered the world in Compton to a loving mother who had turned 16 just 2 weeks earlier. Determined to prove everyone wrong, she spent her pregnancy studying child psychology, preparing to raise him despite those who doubted she was old enough to do so. Dre's father, however, struggled with personal issues, which led to challenges in their household. She made the difficult decision to leave when Dre was still a baby. Yes, nowadays, separation and divorce are common even when a child is involved, but back then, it was pretty rare. One of the only things his father left behind was Dre's middle name, Romel, inspired by his amateur music band, the Ramos. She later met her new husband and had 2 more children, Tyree, 3 years younger than Dre, and his sister Shamika, who's around 12 years younger than him. The 2 brothers developed a deep bond, spending most of their time together. With their mother working long hours, their grandmother played a major role in raising them. Dre's early years were marked by constant moving, Long Beach, Watts, South Central, before finally settling in Compton. Even as a baby, his mother recalls how responsive he was to music, always drawn to the home speaker. By the time he was 4, he was already behind the turntables, acting as the DJ at her house parties. She'd hand him a small list of records, and he'd sit there all night playing them. Before he could even read, he had a system. If there was a song he knew people loved, he'd memorize the look of the vinyl label and he'd stack them up, arranging a playlist in the order he thought flowed best. Yeah, back in those days, there was no Spotify, no Apple Music. Playlists weren't automatic. You had to switch songs manually. His mother recalls, he would be the little DJ, and before record players could go back and forth, he destroyed a few of them. Ironically, what helped him learn to read wasn't school. It was spending hours studying the liner notes on album covers, memorizing which artist played what on each track. When his mother's second marriage ended, Dre, still a young teenager, had to step up and help take care of his younger siblings. His little brother, Tyree, wasn't just family. He was Dre's best friend. They did everything together. Dre describes Tyree as naturally funny and magnetic, someone who could light up a room the moment he walked in. Tyree idolized his big brother, and Dre always looked out for him. Dre grew up in a tough neighborhood where opportunities were limited and making the right choices wasn't always easy, but he stayed grounded, guided by his mother, who taught him early about the dangers of that path. He always had a deep passion for music, especially 70s funk, something he shared with her. Music was so omnipresent in their house that it became the foundation of his musical education. Now back to 1979. Dre was 14, finishing up junior high. He and a group of friends took the bus from Compton to the LA Coliseum to attend the world's greatest funk fest, an 11-hour lineup of pure funk greatness. Not long after, Dre and his friends formed a dance crew called the Freak Patrol. After years of watching Soul Train, he picked up pop lock moves with ease. His mother, Verna, fully supported his new passion. She designed custom outfits for the crew and even drove them to competitions. They entered several contests but never placed higher than second. So Dre decided to switch things up, this time behind the turntables. Dre soon started diving into DJing, taking apart old stereo equipment and repurposing the pieces to build a homemade mixer. By September, Dre started high school as a freshman. He had a talent for drafting and could have pursued an aircraft drafting apprenticeship if only he had focused more in class. But let's be real, schoolwork wasn't exactly his top priority. He was more interested in chasing girls and kicking it with his homies. Now let's switch it up to Cube. O'Shea Jackson was born in 1969 in South Central Los Angeles, where he grew up as the youngest of 4 siblings. His mother was a hospital clerk, and his father worked as a UCLA groundskeeper. He often credits them for their hard work in keeping him and his siblings off the streets. He refers to his father as a strong role model. He told me how to be a leader and not a follower. He's still a hero to me, still a mentor, still in my corner. I feel blessed just to have him in my life. As a kid, Ice Cube was always into art. He used to draw and even won awards in elementary school for his creative achievements. When he graduated from 6th grade, he gave a speech that left his teachers impressed. It was clear early on that Cube had something special. Now, back to 1979, where our story began and the year Ice Cube fell in love with hip-hop, before going on to shape it himself just a few years later. At just 10 years old, he experienced a moment that would change everything, riding to a dentist appointment with his uncle, who was a DJ at the time. Cube vividly recalls that instant. He had a lot of records, and he had this big radio in the back seat. His uncle played Rapper's Delight, and just like that, he was hooked. Cube immediately played the song on repeat, 7 or 8 times straight. Yeah, his uncle was a real one, and definitely had the patience of a saint, because the version Cube kept rewinding was 14 minutes long. From that moment on, the seed was planted. Cube's passion for hip-hop only grew stronger. He became a true b-boy, soaking up every aspect of the culture. But back then, finding hip-hop wasn't easy. As Cube recalls, you almost needed a treasure map to find it. Yeah, let's put things into context for a second. Back in '79, hip-hop was only 6 years old, originating from the Bronx, New York. In those days, there were no TikTok trends, no internet, smartphones, or social media, so spreading the culture took time. If you were a fan of hip-hop, you had to put in the work, digging through record stores for tapes, tracking down media outlets that actually covered the culture. It wasn't just something you stumbled upon, you had to find it. Now, let's switch it up to the man who helped pioneer a new genre in hip-hop, Eazy-E. 3 decades before N.W.A. made Compton a rap mecca, the city looked very different. Back in the 1950s, it was predominantly a white neighborhood, and Eazy's family was one of the first black families to move in. Eric Wright was born in 1964. He grew up in the same neighborhood as Dr. Dre, just a few blocks away, with his 2 siblings, a brother and a sister. His mother worked as a school administrator, and his father was a postal worker. According to his childhood friend Rendezvous, Eazy was a naturally gifted gymnast. Back when they were kids, flipping on mattresses was a common game in the neighborhood, and nobody could outflip Eazy. Ron even swears he could have made it to the Olympics. Yeah, who would have thought Eazy-E might have been Simone Biles' biggest supporter if he were still around? His mother remembers him as a joyful kid who was always cracking jokes, while his childhood friends describe him as a laid-back prankster. There's even a funny rumor that a monkey escaped from a zoo and started living in the tree in front of his house. Some say Eazy himself spread the story just to troll the neighborhood kids. Despite his small size, Eazy never let anyone push him around. He stood his ground even as a kid. He had a natural charisma and an ambition that set him apart. Long before he ever picked up a microphone, he already knew he was destined to be somebody. Eazy entered high school as a freshman in '78, a year before Dr. Dre. But school never really interested him, and he dropped out in '79 during his sophomore year. He later earned his GED, which is a high school equivalency diploma. Some sources say he briefly worked as a mailroom clerk and even held a job as a window tinter. But as he once admitted in an interview, regular jobs weren't for him. He couldn't explain it, but he really hated taking orders from anybody. Eazy-E always had an interest in music. He knew the basics of playing the drums and piano, and alongside his childhood friend Dr. Dre, who grew up just a few blocks away, he formed a local DJ group called the High-Powered DJ Crew, along with other neighborhood friends. Eazy started setting up a small home studio in the garage of his parents' house, where he and Dre laid down mixtapes. Without knowing that, just a few years later, that same garage would become Ruthless Records headquarters. At the time, they were just a group of high school kids who wanted to be DJs. They pooled their money to buy equipment, spinning at backyard parties, high school dances, and house parties on the weekends. You gotta realize, back then, loading up DJ equipment for a gig was like moving a one-bedroom apartment. Crates of vinyl, turntables, homemade mixers. It was a whole operation. Eazy's cousin even remembers them DJing at his sweetheart dance party back in junior high. And a few years later, as a little nod to their roots, the production stamp on their projects was labeled High-Powered Production, a reference to where it all started. Now, for the diehard fans who've read books about it, I know some authors who've done a great job relating stuff about the group have mentioned this happening in the mid-'80s, just as N.W.A. was forming. But let's clear it up. Dre and Eazy forming the High-Powered DJ Crew actually happened in the early '80s, way before Dre joined the world-class Wrecking Crew. See, interviews and podcasts weren't a thing when some of these books were written. Even Ice Cube and Rendezvous have backed this up in later interviews. The exact timeline is complicated. The truth is rarely simple, especially when it's buried under nearly 4 decades of stories. But I'm doing my best to share it in the right time frame, and as you'll see later on, even legit websites had misleading information for years, like the official release date of the group's debut album. During the early '80s, Lonzo had just opened his club, Eve After Dark, the only teen club in the area, located near Compton. Back then, there were no laws regulating DJs, so the party could go until morning. Lonzo also formed a DJ crew called the World-Class Wrecking Crew, which performed regularly at his club. He was looking for talent and soon brought in a young DJ Yella. Born in 1961 and raised in Compton, he grew up listening to funk. As a young teen, without a single lesson, he taught himself to play the drums just by watching his 2 older brothers jam in their garage. He started DJing in Los Angeles clubs during high school, before eventually landing a gig with Lonzo. Years later, he would become the oldest member of the group. Lonzo wasn't just running a club, he was bringing in talent. He invited acts to perform, and one night Curtis Blow, known as the first solo rapper, came from New York to perform at Eve After Dark. That same night, Dr. Dre's uncle, who worked as a bouncer at the club, snuck him in. He had no idea that what his nephew was about to experience would change everything. He witnessed something he never saw before, the art of scratching. It was unlike anything he'd ever experienced, and he couldn't wait to try it himself. He and a friend put together a homemade setup, 2 turntables rigged with a balance knob to switch between them. For Christmas, his mother, seeing how passionate her son was, saved up enough money to buy him a new Mark 11 to 50 mixer, a DJ tool that would allow him to play both turntables at once, but more importantly, it gave him the ability to record his first tapes. When he unwrapped his present, excitement took over. Before even setting it up, he rushed outside to show his friends. As he later recalled, it was the ultimate thing to have. Next thing he knew, kids from the neighborhood were showing up at his house to get their tapes made. Dre would scratch and shout out their names over the beat, his first taste of making money from his craft. His mother remembers it clearly. Ever since she bought him that mixer, Dre barely left his bedroom. He practiced all day, skipping dinner, and most nights he'd fall asleep with his headphones on, music still blasting. And since his mother didn't know how to turn it off, she'd simply take the headphones off his head, whisper goodnight, and let him keep dreaming about the art form he was mastering. For Verna, this was a win. The loud music, the kids constantly coming over. None of it bothered her, because at the end of the day, it meant her son wasn't out in the streets getting into trouble. One night in late '82, a 17-year-old Dr. Dre, who had made it a habit to hit up Eve After Dark on weekends, saw an opportunity. One of Lonzo's DJs didn't show up. Dre wasn't about to let that moment pass. In a bold move, he pushed his way up to the turntables, and to make sure he got noticed, he went straight for a challenge, calling out DJ Yella, the Wrecking Crew's main DJ, to a battle. Lonzo, intrigued by Dre's confidence, decided to give him a shot. He handed him the decks and told him to perform a set. Dre mounted the stage like he had always dreamed. He grabbed a headset, slid it on, and locked in. Then, he did something that left the whole club in shock. Dre pulled off a mix that was completely unheard of at the time, blending two records in perfect sync, even though they had completely different tempos. One track was high BPM, the other was slow. The crowd didn't know which rhythm to follow, but one thing was certain, they loved it. That night changed everything. Dre was then offered a spot in the world-class Wrecking Crew and started earning $50 a night, initially under the name Dr. J, inspired by his favorite basketball player, Julius Erving. But soon, that evolved. He became Dr. Dre, the master of mixology, a name that fused his first alias with his real name, marking the beginning of a legendary journey. All right, fam, that wraps up today's episode. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten MC Ren, the D.O.C, and Arabian Prince, as well as Krazy Dee. I will introduce them at the right time, as soon as they come into the picture, which happens more in the mid-'80s. In the next episode, we will take a deep dive into the formation of the group, explaining how Dr. Dre first met a young Ice Cube and started recording street mixtapes together, Eazy-E's transition from the streets to the music industry following the loss of his cousin, the release of the world-class Wrecking Crew's debut album, Ice Cube forming the Stereo Crew, and the creation of Ruthless Records. So stay tuned and hit the notification bell, as the second episode will drop in the following weeks. And for short animated stories and classic rap news, don't forget to follow us on Instagram. Oh yeah, one last thing, fam. Sorry if those little ads caught you off guard. What you just seen pop up, that's our brand new store. And our collection, Heritage Blocks, is all about paying homage to the iconic places that birthed the global movement. Every bit will go right back into the next episodes and future projects. Big love to everyone who stayed till the end. Peace out, and see you real soon for episode 2.